She was just a maid's daughter, quiet, unnoticed, and often told she'd never belong in the world of the rich. But when a powerful millionaire mocked her mother in front of his guests, everything changed. He offered a cruel challenge, certain the little black girl couldn't possibly understand the foreign words he spoke. Yet, what came next left the entire room frozen in disbelief. Because when she opened her mouth, she didn't just speak his language, she shattered every stereotype he ever held. What did that moment reveal about who truly holds power and who's been underestimated all along? It started in the quiet rhythm of everyday life, a life that rarely drew attention, yet carried the quiet dignity of endurance. Amara, a single mother, worked as a live-in maid for one of the city's wealthiest families. Every morning before the sun rose, she would lace up her worn shoes, pull her hair into a neat bun, and walk the long, uphill road to the mansion that stood like a castle above her neighborhood. Her hands carried the weight of years, scrubbing, polishing, cooking, yet her eyes still held kindness. She never complained, never asked for more than respect. But in a house where power was measured in money, her voice was often invisible. Her daughter, Lena, was the light that kept her going. Just 12, quiet and observant, she carried books everywhere she went. While other kids ran through the narrow streets, Lena sat beneath a tree with pages filled with words from languages few in her world understood. English, French, Mandarin, she absorbed them all with a quiet hunger to learn, to rise, to prove that she was more than the world believed her to be. The mansion she often visited with her mother was a world of glittering chandeliers and cold glances. The Wexlers, the family who employed Amara, treated her like furniture, useful, silent, and easily replaceable. Mr. Wexler, a self-made millionaire known for his arrogance, loved to boast about his success. To him, people like Amara were background noise, a reminder of the class he believed he had escaped. Yet even in silence, Lena noticed everything: the subtle mockery in the guests' laughter when her mother served dinner, the way Mrs. Wexler avoided eye contact, or how Mr. Wexler's tone sharpened when Amara dared to speak too kindly, too confidently. Still, Amara taught her daughter one thing above all: never let their words define your worth. Every Sunday, while her mother cleaned the study, Lena would sit near the open window, listening to the world beyond, snippets of business calls in foreign tongues, words she didn't yet understand, but wanted to. She began to mimic them, whispering phrases, matching the rhythm of voices she overheard. To her, language was power, an invisible key that opened locked doors. But the balance of their fragile peace began to shift one evening during a lavish party at the Wexler estate. Amara had been asked to stay late, serving guests at a dinner filled with polished laughter and golden glasses. Lena waited quietly in the kitchen corner, reading as her mother worked. The air smelled of perfume and privilege. Then came the moment that would set everything in motion: a careless insult, thrown with the ease of someone too comfortable in their superiority. Mr. Wexler, half drunk and full of pride, began boasting about his global business deals, mimicking foreign partners with exaggerated accents to amuse his guests. Laughter rippled through the room, cruel and hollow. And then his eyes fell on Amara. He smirked, gesturing toward her. "I bet she doesn't even understand a word I'm saying," he sneered. The room chuckled. Amara froze, embarrassment burning through her. Lena looked up from her book, her small hands tightening on the pages. It was supposed to be just another night, another moment to endure, another insult to swallow. But something in the air had changed. The guests' laughter felt sharper, the chandelier lights too bright. Amara lowered her gaze, trying to stay invisible, unaware that her daughter's silence was about to shatter everything. Because sometimes injustice doesn't scream, it builds quietly, one small humiliation at a time, until it finally demands to be answered. And that night, in a room full of power and privilege, a child who had been underestimated her whole life was about to change everything. The laughter in the Wexlers' grand dining room echoed like a cruel symphony, sharp, hollow, and full of mockery. Amara stood near the wall, her apron neatly folded, eyes fixed on the floor as if starring hard enough could make her disappear. Her pulse thudded in her ears, every muscle begging her to shrink, to not become the night's entertainment. But Mr. Wexler wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine, that smug grin curling at the edges of his mouth. "Tell you what," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "If your daughter here can translate what I just said, I'll give you my job for a day." The table erupted with laughter that didn't come from humor, but superiority. He thought it was safe, a joke meant to remind everyone where people like Amara belonged. Lena's heart pounded. She looked up, her small voice trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper, a fire that had been quietly growing inside her. She'd been invisible her whole life, moving through halls where no one saw her. But now, every eye was on her, and the air around her seemed to hum with tension. The words Mr. Wexler had mocked moments ago weren't just meaningless sounds to her. She'd spent months listening to him bark orders in that foreign language during his business calls. She knew those words. She understood them. But her mind raced should she stay silent, as her mother always warned, or speak, and risk everything. Before she could decide, one of the guests leaned forward. "Go on, little one," the woman said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Show us what you've got. Or can you?" The laughter came again, soft and poisonous. Amara's hands tightened around the tray she was holding, the glasses trembling. She whispered under her breath, "Lena, stay quiet." But Lena couldn't. She looked at her mother, saw the humiliation in her eyes, the same humiliation she'd endured countless times. Something inside her snapped. She took a step forward. The room fell silent. Even the soft clink of silverware stopped. And then, in flawless Mandarin, she began to translate every word Mr. Wexler had said. Her tone was calm, confident, almost melodic. The words flowed effortlessly, and with each syllable, the disbelief in the room grew thicker. When she finished, there was only silence. Mr. Wexler's smirk vanished. He stared at her, speechless, his arrogance stripped bare in front of everyone. The guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to laugh, clap, or look away. But humiliation does strange things to people like him. Instead of admitting his mistake, Mr. Wexler's face twisted into something darker. "Cute trick," he said sharply. "Who taught you that?" Lena didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was louder than anything she could have said. Moments later, Amara was ordered to take her daughter home. No explanation, no thanks, just the cold dismissal of a man who'd lost control of his own story. The laughter had stopped, replaced by whispers. But the punishment came the next morning. When Amara arrived at work, the head maid met her at the door, eyes lowered. "Mr. Wexler says your services are no longer needed," she murmured. "He doesn't want trouble." Trouble. That word echoed in Amara's chest like thunder. Trouble for speaking truth. Trouble for being seen. She tried to protest, but the gates closed in her face before she could finish. Days turned into weeks. Without her job, Amara struggled to keep the lights on. The same neighbors who once admired her discipline now whispered that she should have taught her daughter to know her place. Lena overheard them, and each word cut deep. She started to believe maybe it was her fault, that her voice, her intelligence, had brought them ruin. But fate wasn't done testing them. One afternoon, a black car pulled up to their small apartment. Out stepped a woman in a tailored suit, one of the guests from that dinner. She wasn't smiling this time. She handed Amara an envelope and said softly, "Mr. Wexler may have tried to humiliate you, but he humiliated himself instead." Someone overseas saw that video. Amara froze video. The woman nodded. "It's spreading. People are talking." Inside the envelope was an offer that would change their lives. But before Amara could even process it, fear gripped her. Because with every view, every share, their faces were becoming public. And power never forgives being embarrassed. And somewhere across town, Mr. Wexler was watching that same video, his jaw tight, his mind already plotting how to make sure the world forgot what that little black girl had done. The storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The world watched, but Amara and Lena didn't feel like they were part of it anymore. The video, just a few seconds of a frightened girl translating a millionaire's mockery into flawless Mandarin, had gone viral overnight. Across social media, it was being called the moment that silenced a billionaire. People were praising Lena's brilliance, her courage, her poise. But behind the glow of screens and headlines, life had become something far darker. Within days, their faces were everywhere. Journalists camped outside their small apartment, knocking, calling, shouting questions through the door. Some wanted to celebrate Lena as a prodigy. Others wanted to dig deeper, too deep. And Mr. Wexler, he wanted revenge. He had built his empire on control of image, of narrative, of power. And now, a maid's daughter had taken that from him with nothing but words. Investors started asking questions. Business partners hesitated. His name became a punchline on late-night shows. Every insult he had thrown at Amara replayed on loop across the internet. So he did what men like him always do: he shifted blame. He called a press conference, claiming the incident was fabricated, the video edited. His lawyers sent letters to news outlets. And then, quietly, they came for Amara. One afternoon, as rain hammered the cracked windows, a knock echoed through their small apartment. Lena looked up from her homework, her heart quickening. Amara opened the door to find two men in suits, faces cold, voices polite in that way meant to intimidate. They handed her a thick envelope, a lawsuit, defamation, theft of private footage. Mr. Wexler expects a full apology and removal of all posts involving his likeness, one of them said before walking away. The walls seemed to close in. Amara's hands trembled as she read. They were demanding everything: money she didn't have, silence she couldn't give. Her world, already fragile, began to crack. That night, Lena found her mother sitting in the dark, staring at the letter. "Mama," she whispered, "we didn't do anything wrong." Amara's eyes glistened. "Sometimes, baby," she said softly, "the truth isn't what they protect, it's what they bury." The next morning, a storm of reporters blocked their path. Microphones pushed into their faces. "Lena, how does it feel to be the girl who embarrassed a millionaire? Amara, are you exploiting your daughter for fame?" The air buzzed with flashing cameras and cruel questions. Lena clung to her mother's hand, terrified. Then suddenly, the crowd parted. A woman stepped forward, the same guest from that dinner, the one who had sent the envelope weeks ago. She held out a small microphone. "Let her speak," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Let the world hear her story." Amara hesitated, but Lena squeezed her hand. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. She looked into the sea of cameras, her small voice steady. "My mother works harder than anyone I know," she said. "She taught me languages so I could understand people, not so they could laugh at us. Mr. Wexler thought we were beneath him, but my mother's strength, our dignity, can't be taken away." The street went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. That video, the one of her trembling but fearless words, spread even faster than the first. Millions watched. And while some applauded, others attacked. Hate poured in through messages, threats, slurs. They said she was lying, that she was coached, that she didn't deserve the attention. It wasn't just racism now, it was backlash, brutal and relentless. Days later, as Amara walked Lena home from school, a car slowed beside them. The tinted window rolled down. Mr. Wexler's eyes met hers, cold, unflinching. "You think you've won," he said quietly. "You'll see what happens when people like you forget their place." Then the car drove off, leaving a spray of mud on their shoes. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made her flinch, but beneath the fear, something stronger was taking root. She realized this fight wasn't just about a job, or a language, or a video. It was about visibility, about being seen in a world that wanted her invisible. She looked at her mother, asleep on the couch, exhaustion etched across her face. Lena made a silent promise. If the world wanted to silence them, she'd make sure their voices grew louder. Because the truth wasn't just spoken once, it had to be defended. And this time, the fight was far from over. Weeks turned into months, but the echoes of that night never faded. The video of Lena's speech, her trembling voice calling for dignity in a world that mocked her mother, continued to ripple far beyond their small city. It was shared, reposted, analyzed, and debated on every platform imaginable. Some called it the awakening of a generation. Others dismissed it as a moment of misplaced sympathy. But for Amara and Lena, it was neither a victory nor a curse. It was a beginning. The lawsuit against them quietly dissolved under public pressure. The same company that had once shut its doors on Amara now issued a statement praising her dedication and strength. But she didn't return to clean those marble floors again. Instead, with support from community members and small donations that trickled in from strangers who had seen themselves in her struggle, she started something new, a language and empowerment center for underprivileged children. The small building was old, its paint peeling, its windows fogged, but to Lena, it looked like hope. Every morning, children from the neighborhood filled the space with laughter, curiosity, and questions. Lena helped teach them, translating not just words, but the power that came with them. For the first time, Amara saw her daughter's gift not as a weapon in a cruel world, but as a bridge, one that could connect people who were never meant to meet. But even as their lives began to heal, the memory of that night, the humiliation, the silence before Lena spoke, lingered like a scar. It reminded them of how fragile dignity can be when the world decides who matters and who doesn't. Mr. Wexler's empire, once untouchable, fractured slowly. Business partners pulled away, his reputation permanently stained by his arrogance. Yet, in interviews, he portrayed himself as the victim, a man destroyed by social media hysteria. And perhaps that was the cruelest irony of all. The powerful still finding ways to claim pain while denying it to others. Still, the world had seen something it couldn't unsee, a child's courage standing against a wall of privilege. And that mattered. One afternoon, months later, Lena stood outside the new center's front steps, watching a group of kids chatter in 3 different languages. She thought about how words, those invisible sounds, had changed her life. They had exposed hatred, yes, but they had also built bridges. For every cruel message that had once filled their inbox, there were now letters from around the world, teachers, mothers, students saying, "You reminded us to speak." Amara, standing beside her, smiled quietly. "Do you ever regret that night?" she asked. Lena shook her head. "No, because if I hadn't spoken then, maybe no one would have listened now." the world didn't transform overnight. Racism didn't vanish because of a viral video or a girl's courage. There were still doors that stayed closed, still glances that burned with quiet judgment. But change, real change, often begins not with grand revolutions, but with one small act of defiance that forces people to look closer. And Lena's act had done exactly that. Her story became a lesson shared in classrooms and community meetings, a reminder that brilliance and humanity don't belong to any one race or class. That sometimes the most powerful resistance is simply refusing to be silent. As the sun set over the city that had once ignored them, Amara and Lena locked up the center for the day. The laughter of children still echoed behind them, fatting into the warm evening air. And somewhere out there, in another mansion, another office, another street, someone was probably underestimating another child just like Lena. Maybe they'd mock her accent, dismiss her background, or question her intelligence. But maybe, just maybe, that child would remember this story, the maid's daughter, who spoke a billionaire's language and made the world listen. Because silence protects no one, but courage speaks every language. So the question is, how many more voices like Lena's will it take before the world finally learns to listen, not to answer, but to understand?